Welcome, Night Owls, to the Book Club After Dark podcast, an inviting moonlit podcast. I'm your host, Danny.
And I'm Michelle. We break down fantasy, romantasy, and thriller novels.
All things enchanting, intriguing, suspenseful, and maybe a little spicy.
Each episode features intimate discussions on captivating stories, character breakdowns, fan theories, and more. And this is your content warning. This podcast contains mature themes and discussions that may not be suitable for all audiences. Episodes include explicit language and descriptions of mature romance, as well as depictions of violence and other intense subject matter. This podcast is rated R for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
And going forward from here, there are going to be lots of spoilers for Quicksilver, and the assumption is that you've read the entire book, including the bonus chapters, so consider this your spoiler warning.
So let's get cozy because the best stories are told after dark.
Tonight's drink of the episode is called Saeris' Wake Up, because in the beginning of these chapters, Saeris needs to wake the fuck up. And so with that, we have a Bloody Mary, our take on a spicy Bloody Mary at that. This actually contains... Obviously, we used a Bloody Mary mix, which is from a brand called Old Florida, which is popular here. They're a great brand if you haven't tried them before. We used jalapeno stuffed olives, a little bit of lime juice. We have pickled jalapeno juice in this, and of course, pepper. It's really good. I know, Michelle, you're not a savory drink enjoyer, but this is our take.
It looks
on
delicious.
a Bloody Mary.
It definitely looks delicious. No, I'm not, but
It's actually really good. It's spicy. It's so good.
Just the wake-up call Saeris will need in Yvelia.
Yes, she will definitely need it. Let's immerse ourselves back into the world of Yvelia. And in this episode, we're exploring chapters 6 through 10 of Quicksilver by Callie Hart.
We start with chapter 6, which is titled Everlayne. That's indicator that we are now meeting another character here. So Saeris reflects on the one time it rained when she was 8 and she felt cold for the first time and only time in her life. As she's going into Yvelia, she is going to experience a lot of different things. Remember, she is from a desert, scorching hot deserts, and water's a luxury. And in Yvelia, it's not really the case. What she feels now is way worse than cold. Her bones are ice. She's locked in darkness. She heard female voices in her head speaking in a strange language. You know, she just went through the Quicksilver. This is kind of her indicator of the languages kind of going in her head. And she has this feeling of wanting to slip into nothingness because the pain. And then she opens her eyes and she's laying in bed and is actually comfortable. The walls in the rooms are a dark shade of blue. There's paintings everywhere, and she assumes she's still in the palace and not in
Madra's
Yvelia.
Palace.
Yes, Madra's palace, but she's very far away from there in a whole nother dimension, planet, place.
I wanted to note here that for Saeris, I'm trying to imagine her character arc, right? She's someone who's lived on the streets now for years since her mother has passed. She's an orphan with her brother. She's 24 years old. She's lived on the streets since her mother was murdered in the streets. And she is in this 4-poster beautiful bed that she's never seen this kind of luxury and never experienced something like this. And I think Callie Hart does a very good job of relaying this information. And this concept of we're opening the chapter with her reflecting on it being the first time and only time she was cold was when it rained. Because remember, in Zilvarin, the Silver City is looking at 2 suns 24 hours a day. So to come to this world is just such a reversal of that. And it's the complete polarly opposite of the world that she's from. And I really loved hearing how this was described. And I say hearing because I listened to the audiobook and I also read the book at the same time. So I really enjoyed this part of it and the dichotomy between the two so different worlds, and enjoyed that, the difference between those.
Callie Hart writes it in such an effective way that you can understand the difference, the culture shock ultimately that she has as she is in an now Faye world. And then now also the culture shock of being around the Faye, which the next Faye she becomes in contact with is Everlayne, and she opens the door and she says that as she's walking in that Master Eskin said that she would wake up at some point in time. So Saeris has been passed out, and as she has been healing, Everlayne has been helping her, tending to her bedside. She has light blonde hair. She wears it in 2 braids that fall all the way past her waist. She has pale skin, green eyes. And Sarah says she looks about her age. She has to be about 24, 25. And
which is wild.
Right. So she's like, oh, this is just a normal human person that, this is just a young woman. And we come to find pretty quickly how old Everlayne actually is, which is very far off from 24. And Saeris ultimately
putting it delicately. She's
Yeah.
what, 1,500 years old. Oh yeah, they're really close
Right.
in age.
I mean, math has never been my greatest subject, but I would say they're not very, very close together. But Everlayne's kind. What I love, she's a little bit melodramatic, but she's
A little.
very kind. And she's kind of like a Disney princess, ultimately. Like,
She is. She's very girly girl.
yeah.
Yeah, but also like extremely kind. Saeris in the back of her mind the whole time is, okay, when she gives me this water, I'm just going to steal all of it. And so like when they try to barter to get me to pay it back, like I'm prepared for that. And her mindset is just so not used to generosity and kindness from any other creature. And so she's freaked out, first of all, because Saeris starts coughing. Everlayne gives her this cup of water. She's, yeah, I knew you were going to be thirsty. They told me, the healers told me you would be thirsty and she's just like so oblivious to how Saeris must be feeling. So she gets the cup of water and it's 4 days worth of clean, fresh water. I can't believe she's not making me pay for this. My bill is going to be outrageous. Thinking about all these things. So Saeris downs the water. Everlayne's, here, would you like more? And she's, okay, I'm not paying you, but sure. So she pulls up a chair. Everlayne pulls up a chair next to her and she asks her name. And Saeris is like, yeah, you protect your name. Like we saw with when she gets approached in chapter 1 by the Guardian, that she gives a false name. She says that she decided to give her for her real name. So she says what her name is. And Everlayne just gives this air of being genuine right out of the gate. And so I think Saeris feels this comfort from her, but she notices right away that she's Faye. She is trying to remember everything that went on. And she says, was this a dream? What the hell's going on? She remembers death. She remembers the sharp fangs. And she asks Everlayne to see her teeth. And exactly like you said, like, Everlayne's like such a girly girl. Yeah, she's clutched my pearl.
Rude.
Can't believe you asked me. Yeah, to see my teeth. She like scoffs. So she's explaining, look, I didn't know you guys were like real things. Like I had no idea you were real creatures. I thought you were a myth. And you have to remember too here that Everlayne being 1,500 years old, Madra being centuries years old, right? Saeris is 24. So it's not that off base for her and her comprehension of the world that Madra's created in a couple generations before her, for her to be so out of touch with this, because she just doesn't have the same length of time to understand. And so Everlayne's taken aback because she's like, how do you not know what we are? How do you have no idea what's going on here? And she's starting to piece together that Madra has completely eradicated the idea that Faye exists, that magic exists, anything exists in Zilvarin to maintain her control. And we'll see that come up repeatedly. Saeris' character arc as we continue through this and her realization of really what Madra was holding back from her. So in this moment, they have this initial conversation. We really get to know Everlayne. And she talks about how the Fae haven't had wings for thousands of years. She gives Saeris some information about her health. Hey, you basically were on the brink of death, which I think Saeris already knew. You had a concussion. Take it easy here. Saeris mentions to her that, what I know of the Fae is that basically evil. You guys brought war, disease, you were terrible things. You guys are part of our nightmare stories. It would be the equivalent of us telling ghost stories or telling stories about demons or things that come and haunt you. This is how the Fae are perceived in Zilvarin and what Saeris has always known about them. Everlayne comments that the Fae haven't had any kind of blight or thing that would kill them in over a millennia, but that humans themselves are riddled with germs. Everlayne asks her if she remembers in her short-term memory if there was a male that came out of the silver and if a sword called to him. So Saeris gives her name. They have the conversation. Everlayne says, your name is really rare. It's a Fae name, which is interesting to me too. Have we met Saeris' dad? How much do we know about him?
I have some thoughts about Saeris' dad.
We don't know who Saeris' father is, and Saeris and Hayden look nothing alike, and even in personality look nothing alike. And usually when an author identifies this and says how different siblings look, there could be an indication that maybe they don't have the same dads. And I also think it's interesting just due to the fact that Saeris' blood, who she becomes at the end of this novel, and what she's capable of as the alchemist. Any thoughts on her dad or her line, her bloodline, or any of that?
I actually think that her bloodline is tied to Carrions because
Ooh,
in the next
it's
episode,
disturbing because they slept together.
Right. And the only reason why I think that is because in the next episode, we're going to discuss when Kingfisher takes Carrion from the third and brings him to Yvelia. And Kingfisher mistakes his scent as a scent of her kin, of relation. And immediately you dismiss that as like, well, you slept together, so that scent would be there. But he asked specifically, there's a different scent if, you know, the Fae can tell different scents, like sense of a lover versus like familial. And he specifically asked multiple times, are you sure that's not your brother? Are you sure you're not related? So that makes me think that they actually are related in some way. I don't think Carry-On's her dad. I think that would be very
Oh, God.
disturbing. Not that she would, I don't think she would know that, but he might because, you know, I don't know. But I think that
Well,
they're relatives in some way, cousins
I think
of a
it's
sort.
also possible that there is something to do with the number of people in the third that have passed or who are still alive, that it says at the end of the book that there are many people in the third and in Zilvarin in general that have magic still. Saeris realizes that she doesn't have wounds anymore. So imagine you're waking up and you almost just died, and now you wake up like in this room. You don't know where you are. You have some strange lady there in front of you with pointed ears. It's terrifying. And she's, yeah, hey, you might have a concussion. And yeah, the water's free. Keep on going. And you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
So she
And
really
she's
has
in this
no wounds.
place. Yeah, and she's in this place because Everlayne tells her, like, you're in Yvelia. This is the Winter Palace. She's like, what the fuck? What's a winter? Like, where am I? So
Has
she's
no idea.
disoriented from basically everything. Her world's getting flipped around. And then on top of that, as they're having this conversation and she's trying to get like stock of everything. So Renfrance barges into the room and he has dark brown eyes, sandy brown hair, tattooed muscles, splattered in mud. He apologizes, obviously, for coming in. And he came to retrieve a chain from Saeris. And Saeris realizes she's been wearing this necklace. It is enchanted because Kingfisher had to take her through the Quicksilver, and that's kind of like a protection that they have. So because she's human,
relic.
she doesn't really have the mind control over her brain to make sure the Quicksilver doesn't really invade her. But he's struggling. It's been 10 days since he put it on her. So that kind of gives us a time frame of how long she's been passed out. It's been like a week and a half. And he's in the palace there.
Which is
the father...
insane
Mm-hmm.
because her brother, Madra, all of that has been going on for 10 days. She's been out doing nothing. So I can only imagine how Saeris is feeling at this point, knowing that she's been completely incapacitated. The entire third ward could be decimated by now. Could be nothing.
Right.
10 days. Yeah.
Right. So in the necklace, there's a small silver disc that was engraved with tiny markings, and it was cold. And essentially, Renfrance asked her to drop the chain inside of this pouch. He doesn't really even want to touch it, so that he can just take it to Kingfisher. They can return to Kalish, and they're just going to remain in the Winter Palace for as little time as possible because he's not supposed to be there. And then Renfrance just kind of like leaves. So he comes in a storm, leaves in a storm, and kind of leaves Saeris with more questions than answers because she just wants to return home and to protect him in the third from Madra. To your point, she starts freaking out.
So Everlayne was waiting to retrieve the sword, and Saeris is important to her, and they can't let her go. So she essentially says, yeah, we can't. You're not going home. Sorry. We'll make you comfortable, but we're also like not sending you back. And she's what the fuck? She says,
and she has a bath.
We're Faye, and like, we don't really care about your timeline or your plans, and you're going to need to meet our king now. Saeris is familiar with this because she has Queen Madra, and whatever the queen says goes. She understands that she's not going to be able to like negotiate her way out of this. And also, she has no idea where the Quicksilver pool is. She can't get back unless they allow her to. She's like, well, shit, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to basically do what they say until I can figure out an out, how to get home. Saeris has her first bath, and she's never been properly cleaned before. She's never had her hair washed before. She has an overwhelming sense of guilt about being in this tub of water because of how she knows the rest of the third ward is and how they don't have anything. She's just worried about her brother, and there's a lot of guilt here. And She's so grimy and gross that there's like a film in this bath because she's never bathed. She has always had a conception that she was pretty, but beauty was used as currency where she was from, as we know with her mother having been a prostitute, and she just basically always covered her face. So this is the first time that she's really seeing herself in her physical form and really looking at herself for the first time. Which leads us to chapter 7, titled The Dog. We know this is referring to Kingfisher, and we'll get to see him here, and a nod to the Onam Shakrai as well.
So Everlayne guides Saeris throughout the palace. Palaces are huge. The walls and floors are opalescent with marble and shimmered with metallic blues and greens. So it's very beautiful. The description kind of reminded me of like a snowflake, like the inside of a snowflake. You know, how it's just all white and shimmery, and sunlight poured through the windows, but it was devoid of warmth. So she's used to like the grotesque heat of the sun, and this is very different. And the world beyond the sunlight or the windows was a blur of white and gray, and so it's really beautiful, but this is all that she's seeing is like through a window. So she's kind of unsure of the realities of what's outside. They pass a series of statues that resemble the gods, known as the Corcoran. They don't pray to them in Silvar. Madra is the only thing closest to a god, which we saw when we went in the Hall of Mirrors. There were gods there, but Saeris didn't really know them because, you know, Madra, due to all of her power hungry, kind of wiped all knowledge of anything magic, anything that would take away power from her. But then we get kind of a list of the gods in the Corcoran. So we have Styx, which is the gods of shadow, Curin, god of secrets, Nisanai, goddess of masks, Malleus, god of dawn and new beginnings, Balmithin, which is twin sisters and goddesses of the sky. There were once one god, but a mighty storm came and Balmithin refused to take refuge. She was slashed in two by lightning. That's where we have the two suns. Ultimately, this is in Zilvar, and this is where they're referenced to. Baal is the goddess of the sun, and Mithin is the goddess of the moon, or night and day. Yep. This is where Saeris actually recalls that, but the suns is and Min, so it's kind of even been diminished in the human knowledge. And then we have Zareth, the god of chaos and change, and his right boot is discolored from touch. And basically, Zareth, no one wants to draw attention to themselves from Zareth, so they kind of touch as like a good sign, and then they like kind of keep their head down and don't look at him directly. So very superstitious in that fact.
I thought it was foreshadowing a little bit that Zareth is left as the last one that they talk about, and there's a little bit more time spent talking about him. Should have been a foreshadowing moment for me. I didn't piece it together the first read, but definitely noticed at the second read that more time was spent on him, and I should have realized that. I also thought it was interesting about Madra and the highlight I had of believers carry strands of her hair in leather pouches and on their belts. They scrape ash from the funeral pyres of living sacrifices that are burned in her honor and put that in them too. It's supposed to act as a ward against the plague. That's how far Madra's believers has come, is that her people literally take ashes of the dead and carry them around, and it's a completely false thing. It's just wild. She's just
that goes
off her rocker nuts.
Right. And people will do anything if fear's involved. You know, you can get people to do literally anything, any sort of superstitious act, if there is a layer of fear. Fear is basically the greatest control in terms of politics. They continue through the palace and pass by Faye, who's there. Fae aren't typically the high Fae, which if you've read any of like the Akatar series or any other series with Faes, you know that like there's different levels, there are different types of Fae and what they represent. So she's just realizing like they have different skin colors, they look completely different, and the only thing that they're seeing is similar,
just like us.
Yeah. Saeris commented how cold the palace is, but there are wards in place to ensure the cold is kept at bay in Yvelia. She's just like, it's freezing. And Everlayne's like, what are you talking about? There are wards. She's just not used to anything probably below like 110 degrees. You know, this is going to be very cold for her, even if it's like comfortable for the Fae. And then they entered this grand hall of the Yvelian court. There are hundreds of Fae in rows. Walls are adorned with sculptures and tapestries. And on the walls, the skull of Omnam Shakrai. This is from the last episode when we went over that whole battle at the gate, that this is where his head is. This is what happened to his body. The last dragon, and is kind of like just hang there and on the wall. And then we find who
It's interesting,
Belicon
too,
is.
to me that the head of the dragon that Kingfisher slayed is on display in Belicon's court and in this gigantic room for Belicon. And it's Sir, who didn't do anything. But okay, sure, you can have Onamshakai's head, I guess.
Is that common of political heads?
But also, okay, fine. It's
Right.
different when you
It's
go and read
like-
the bonus chapters because it's like adds more insult to injury of what's happening to Kingfisher in this scene, at least for me, because he's walking in and then like the reason these people don't like him and all this is like they just don't even
Because
know
of
what they're
Belicon.
talking about.
Well, because Belicon has painted this image of him. And what I get from Belicon is ultimately like Kingfisher is, as long as he's useful, he is kind of like my stepson. But as soon as he is, not useful, then he can get the fuck out of here. So obviously with the dragon and being the last dragon and a major kill is like, okay, this is useful. You can, and I wonder if this was, because we read that chapter, I wonder if Belicon's army just went and like took the dragon, or if, Kingfisher, because Kingfisher's personality was very different back then and what we are seeing here. I wonder if he gifted to him and like a sign of good faith for, or like traded it to him. Like, I wonder if there was some sort of more to how he actually obtained the skull. But ultimately, he's just saying, like, this is my kill, but it's not actually his. We know it's Kingfisher's. But the king himself is imposing. He has long black hair, tinged gray at the temples. His eyes are deep brown and unfriendly. He's sat on his throne, and he has a sword that he's just, like, clutching. Then we have another male who sits next to Belicon, who is Orias. And I'm assuming he's his aide, because ultimately he scolds Saeris for not bowing, and he's like gaunt and sickly looking. Blue veins snaked across his cheeks, and eyes are like dull pewter. Really, he's just kind of gross looking.
I'm wondering now if this is like Madra's aide, the captain, where you see the captain later towards the end of the book, and he kind of looks like a shell of himself as well. I wonder if this aide has been wanting to die for a long time. I'm wondering because he makes up the triumvirate of obviously Madra, as we know, Malcolm and Belicon, that is he also realiving his aide too? Like he has somebody he wants to stick around, and this guy, because he looks gaunt and sickly, has been needing to die a while ago, and he's just stuck around because Belicon wants him to. But anyway, neither here from there. Just something to note.
Right. The king finds Saeris' open contempt amusing, at first, at least, and tells Orias to silence himself. She's currently in the room as a guest and will be allowed leniency. But as soon as she leaves the room, she is a subject of the court and must behave as such. He is forgiving any sort of disrespect because he understands that she's not from here, but that his leniency will only go so far. He gives her a directive. He tells Saeris that she'll be spending her time in the libraries learning their ways, and she is going to fulfill a task, which she keeps like interrupting. She's like, what are you talking about? What task? And she wanted to go back and see Hayden. And Belicon stated that he's already dead, since Madra said she'd laid waste to them in the third. And here I'm just like, how does Belicon know that? Like here we should, like on a second read, why would he know what Madra said? Unless and we know that he's not talking to Kingfishers. We should have known that there was communication between them from this point. But he refers her as the bitch queen, put an end to your home and all who reside in it.
They're related.
Right.
So
and
Belicon's his brother, Madra's brother. Malcolm is also Madra's brother. So yeah.
They've waited 1,000 years for the Quicksilver to be awoken because Madra put the sword in there. She's been alive for multiple millennia. Ultimately, she's the one that put the sword in there in the first place, and she's been in power way before them. Ultimately, Saeris' task is to awaken the Quicksilver, to reopen the pathways between the worlds, and her cooperation will dictate her time in Yvelia, whether she is going to be a prisoner or she is going to be a member of the court. It's really up to her, and threatened essentially that, if you act out, then you will no longer exist. And then kind of like, shoo, I'm done with you. You bore me now. And then the king calls for them to bring in the dog. And this is where we get the title of the chapter for Kingfisher, which the guards dragged, which she calls death, into the great hall. He was in a feral state because of the Quicksilver. And the crowd echoed the name Kingfisher throughout the hall with a mix of reverence and fear. There's this misconception of him, even though he was once known, and in Kala she is known as a hero, that they are basically calling him a traitor, essentially. King Bellicon makes a spectacle of Kingfisher, calling him the Scourge of Yvelia. And, there's just a bunch of whispers about him, rumors that the members of the court talk amongst themselves. He's the male that stalks your children's nightmares, the male who torched a city on a whim, the male who's cut your throats as soon as he looks at you. Does this pathetic creature strike such an opposing figure now? And it talks about his banishment, that he was just over a century in this prison, and it's been over a century since Gillifae. He asked the crowd if he should forgive Fisher. And the crowd's like all varied, and Everlayne's like freaking out because, that's her brother, and, she's worried that Bellicon will ultimately kill him. Everlayne begs Malway to stop Bellicon and says that if she loved Everlayne's mother, then she will stop this hysteric. She's not really given a title, but it's just assumed in that sort of sense, and how like they're talking, because she's elderly in a way. And she has like this prophecy, ultimately, that in order to hear the prophecy, Malway must hold the sword. And Bellicon dismisses her, but Malway insists the gods must be obeyed, and she grabs a sword and blood flows down the edge. And she says Kingfisher will not die by his hand, because Bellicon is very quick to ultimately get rid of Kingfisher and sees this as an excuse to, kill him, since he's left his banishment. Ultimately, he escaped prison. And Bellicon must return him from where he was taken, along with the sword and the pendant. And while Bellicon's super insistent of, no, I don't want to. I want to kill him, and this is my sword, the god sword that belongs to me, which is the sword that he pulled out of the Quicksilver. Or, I'm sorry, the sword that Saeris pulled out of the Quicksilver. But Malway insists that if Bellicon doesn't listen, the gods and the Winter Palace will fall.
Yeah, and this whole scene is really telling. It's a lot of foreshadowing of a lot of information we just don't have yet. And you can feel that with Saeris, because she's, the fuck is going on? But you're learning a lot right now about the world and what's going on with Kingfisher, where he's been. You understand that he's been gone for over 100 years. It's here that when you go back on a reread, how much information is actually put forth here. And then knowing that Malcolm and Bellicon are brothers, and that they're probably in cahoots, right? Of, oh, Kingfisher he escaped. So if he comes to you, basically bring him back. I think this whole time, Bellicon ultimately was going to try and bring Kingfisher back to Malcolm, because he really doesn't care. He has no use for him. And that's his stepson that he's literally let be with Malcolm for 100 years, trapped without a care in the world. He couldn't care less. He has no feelings whatsoever. General Renfis, who's one of my favorite characters, emerges from the crowd with a black eye and a split lip. The king is not pleased, because supposedly Renfis is supposed to be at the front lines at Kalish. In why has he returned for Kingfisher against Bun's orders? This is where Renfis kind of makes his case in front of everyone, because I think if there wasn't an audience here, Bellicon would have acted completely differently. But because there is, and the entire court is there, he's forced to have to listen to this. Renfis, who is Kingfisher's right hand, and Bellicon knows this, lets him know that Kingfisher is going to ensure that they're going to be able to win the war because of the power that Kingfisher has. The pendant is going to continue to maintain Kingfisher's sanity, because right now he looks ridiculous. He doesn't have the pendant on. He's acting wild. He's not acting himself. It will save the king time to not have to do a trial for what happened in Gillifae. And it ultimately means that Kingfisher would die in Kalish. Then here, look, I'm going to do you a favor. He'll die out there in battle, so what difference does it make? Let me just take him. Bellicon decides to look good in front of his people, essentially, in this moment, and decides that Kingfisher can be sent to Kalish in a week, and he'll stay and help Saeris awaken the Quicksilver, and then he's going to be banished from the court. His job is to help Saeris awaken this Quicksilver, and then that's it. He needs to be gone. He's being forced out. Renfis loops the chain over Kingfisher. Finally, Kingfisher gets his relic back and hauls him out of the Great Hall. Everlayne and Saeris meet Renfis and Fisher in the hallway. Fisher's vomiting. Everlayne is screaming at Renfis this whole time, because she's just, what are you doing? And she's like, where have you been? Also. And he basically is like, yeah, I got jumped by 8 people on the way here. I tried to get here sooner and I couldn't. So she thought that Renfis was going to arrive sooner to state this case. and not cut it as close as he did, where she had to get someone else from the court involved. So Saeris studies Kingfisher for the first time and realizes that it's not death. He has a name. His name is Kingfisher, and she studies him. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because I don't think Kingfisher's real name is Kingfisher. Kingfisher's mother writes to him that's not his real name. And so they don't go by real names. So I'm hoping in book 2 we find out what Kingfisher's actual name is. But anyways, so Kingfisher, for the first time since the Hall of Mirrors, she sees him again fully. He's obviously gorgeous, defined jaw, dark stubble, high cheekbones, proud nose. We see his picture on the cover of the book. Jade eyes, filaments of silver in his right iris. Everlayne scolds him, of course, and Kingfisher's look, I just need some whiskey and to go to bed, so please get away. At this point, Saeris doesn't know that Kingfisher and Everlayne are brother and sister, so she'll find that out later. But this dynamic between those two kind of makes sense after you know that. She dismisses Kingfisher and Renfis and walks Saeris to her room. So this is where you find out that Yvelia has been at war with Sansroth. And there's this quote: even in times of peace, the Fae are always at war. There are those among our ranks that might pretend to be your friend, but often they're hiding knives behind their back, ready to sink them into your back. So you do well to remember that. Essentially meaning that there's snakes in the grass. You can't trust anyone here. And that is almost always true of these courts, because in this case too, these people live very long lives and they're willing to wait you out.
They play the long game.
They're playing the long game, and there's definitely some indication of that here.
And Saeris even questions, like, wait, does that mean I can't trust her? You know, which is valid. I mean, she's literally saying, like, don't trust anyone. Yeah. And that does apply to Everlayne, because she's the princess ultimately. And she's saying, like, the king's bad. It's like, but that's your father. You know, Saeris is on her guard. Chapter 8 is titled The Alchemist. This is where we get introduction to Saeris's powers, which we've already seen it, but kind of more in-depth process and what an alchemist actually is. The next morning came, and Saeris realizes the world was black outside the window. And she's like, whoa, night. Wild concept. Yvelia only has one son, and it was snowing outside. So there were mountains in the distance, trees surrounding the palace. It was beautiful. Ultimately, this is just a setting. And, you know, there's a city, there's a river, very beautiful. As Saeris walks into the library, the Fae showed she was not welcomed. They haven't seen a human in ages. And like centuries. And then we get a little background story on like why in the next few chapters, but she already gets a note that she's not welcome there. And then we get a backstory on her mother. So her mother had worked in the library in the third, and most books were moldy and it stunk of death. The library in the third was actually underground, and it was a little bit cooler than anywhere else in the third. So it was actually a luxury, even though it was like kind of moldy, damp, and smelled bad. It at least was cool in a sense. She has researched what she could on metalwork because she had access to the library. It was really a privilege. Yvelia's library was staggering in comparison. There are stacks of books lined the walls and a domed glass ceiling stretched across. She can see the outside.
Beautiful.
World. Yeah.
This
and then
library, I imagine in my head, is like gorgeous.
She says that I was unprepared for how the sight of so many bound hardback books would affect me. This was a treasure beyond Madra's hoard of gold, more precious than rubies and diamonds. The information inside a place like this was too vast to comprehend, and the light. As book lovers, we see this library and we kind of see her sentiment here that the value in books and a beautiful library is far more than any sort of gold or other materialistic thing in the world.
Yeah, and I think there's one other piece here, is that it establishes that Saeris knows how to read. And that is something that you would want to figure out, knowing, right? But also, you're wondering that, like, how does this girl know how to read if she was homeless and she didn't have education and she's in the third ward? What this does is identify that, okay, she's in the third ward, but her mom knew how to read. She taught her some education. Gives an indicator that Saeris does have some education and is able to comprehend a library and everything in it. Gives her a little bit more credit and backstory. Even as she's thinking some of these thoughts about this library, you're starting to understand a bit more about her. It's helpful there to understand that she's able to read and she'll be able to comprehend the text that she needs to work towards this mission, and she's not completely screwed by being illiterate, which would be not good.
Right. Everlayne introduces Rusarius, which is an old librarian who was reappointed to work in the library, essentially for this task. Had a childlike inquisitiveness that radiated from him, and he just I liked his voice in the audiobook because it just sounded like a typical librarian, a little bit. His voice was a little nasally. He's really picky, no food, only crackers, dry crackers, because all these books have to be in top condition. Saeris is really struggling with finding information on Alchemist because the whole job of librarians in the past or researchers, they were supposed to research the background of alchemists, how they came to be, how do they, have their magic essentially. And it's not well documented because it's kind of protected in a sense. There are documentations, broad overviews. She can understand metalwork in a sense, but to really know the nitty-gritty is not something that she can read in a book. We understand in this dialogue that there are differences in the types of alchemists there are, and we also get a background in the little bit to the history of Yvelia. The alchemists are Faye. Saeris must have Faye blood. Ultimately, we've established that, and enough blood to stop Solus from burning her hands. It's important that she has a strong bloodline. That also gives note on who her father is. He has to be someone of worth, not just like a random, like lesser Fae. He has to be someone important that was ultimately trapped when the Quicksilver was sealed.
I wanted to also mention on that front alchemy and what it is. By definition, it's chemistry at its root. It's a medieval, before chemistry existed, it's like a medieval term, alchemy, and it literally means transformation of matter. It's an attempt to convert base metals, and you could find elixirs, things like that. Alchemy also could have been referred to as an alchemist could have been a creator of medicines in different times throughout history. It just depends on how you look at it. In this book, obviously, we're referring to the movement of base metals into gold or into different types of metals overall. Alchemy is referring to an alchemist can manipulate quicksilver. But I want to identify that if someone's unfamiliar with the term alchemy and the historical references here, and also the use of the word in fantasy and how, as a genre, that term has been used in different varieties of storytelling. But in this case, yes, the alchemist is going to be someone who can specifically manipulate quicksilver, but historically that also has a real meaning in a real word.
As they're getting into their lesson, Kingfisher appears, and this is where Saeris is like, the library grew a few degrees darker. This is before we know that he's like our actual shadow daddy. This is kind of like an allusion to that. He literally wields the shadows around him. And, he's just, I know a lot of people make comments about Kingfisher and he's just an absolute dick. He's just really sarcastic and he's just making constant comments towards Saeris, basically trying to get a rise out of her. He kind of revels in that, ultimately getting her all riled up. And their first conversation ends up being like a dick joke because she's like looking at his sword and he's like, do you know what, he's making comments with the sword, and obviously the sword's referencing dick, and it becomes like this banter that they're like, what is going on here? And Saeris, who is like a librarian, he's very literal, he's like not understanding the sarcasm and the banter. He's like, yeah, the sword length, and he's just like, yeah, swords, yeah, great. And there's obviously the underlying notion of what their conversation is, but we'll see that throughout, since now Saeris is away, Kingfisher, like they have to work closely together. We're going to continue to see this back and forth between them all the time. And if it doesn't make Saeris angry immediately, it tends to get like sexual in a way, and then it will just make her angry. We'll see like this back and forth throughout the chapters with them. And then Everlayne's just like, okay, enough of that. Let's
Awkward.
talk about Faye. Yeah. Can we not talk about my brother like that?
Literally.
And the first text is the dawn genesis of Yvelia. Let's talk about the very beginning, the first dawn of Yvelia. And it's about history, Fae etiquette, and politics. And Saeris is like, this isn't my business. Like, why do I care? Why should I care? And Kingfisher's like, I like her loyalty. She likes her family. She loves her family. She wants to get back to her family. I can respect that. He says that there's a good chance her people are alive, but no one wants to tell her that because then she'll want to leave. And they're manipulating her because they want her to stay and figure out the Quicksilver. That goes to the point of the last chapter. Everlayne said, don't trust the Fae. And literally, Everlayne is manipulating her, and Kingfisher's the only one being honest with her. which establishes that relationship between them, where she is going to kind of lean more towards him because he's being honest. Even though he's an asshole, he's at least honest with her and doesn't sugarcoat or
Right.
manipulate her in ways.
Exactly. And also, it points to Belicon's reasoning for lying to her, because if her family's gone, she has no reason to try to rush back there, and there's no goal to get back home if there is no home. He didn't necessarily talk to her. He probably just said that on a whim, but we can speculate on that all day. We won't know the true history of that, but we do know that she did not want to be any part of her brothers, and that they definitely did have a feud going there. And it gets resolved, of course, at the end of this book, but at the time, Belicon's doing anything he can to just be like, yeah, we want to keep her in our control and we can't lose her because of what she's able to do. He wants to use her. A conversation where Kingfisher's saying Madra knows that there's a war coming, and to her, because the doorsteps and the pathways can be opened now, that there's an alchemist with the Fae, and that she lied and tricked Belicon, which ended up cutting off trade lines. And she knows that the Dianathus heir is in Zelvarin. And we know that the Dianathus heir is Carrion. And that he knows that. But we don't get to find that out until much later. But the Dianathus heir is in Zelvarin. So we hear this really early on in the book and have absolutely no idea what this means. We're like, yeah, okay, because we're in Saeris' perspective. We have no idea. Right. Oh, yeah, Dianathus heir. Okay, cool. That's great. That the Dianathus heir is in Zelvarin. Who is there? Why do I care? Yeah. Fisher emphasizes that Saeris is the alchemist and no one else can open these pathways. They haven't had an alchemist in a very long time, and nobody's been able to manipulate Quicksilver. Everlayne scolds Fisher for giving Saeris the pendant because she is now worried about his body, because his body has the Quicksilver in it. And he says, oh, I had the ring to protect me, which again, we know that the ring is bullshit and means nothing. Yes. He just says this. And this is where you actually find out that he's not such a terrible guy, because he's saying this to his sister to protect her because he loves her. He doesn't want her to worry about him. So he says this to her in a way that's always fine. I had the ring. Saeris studies the plate that he wears at his neck, which is engraved with an elaborate lines and a wolf's head. So Ren emphasizes the war with Sansaroth is of the utmost importance. This is Sansaroth, where we have the vampires, of course, and Malcolm and the whole horde and everything else. They need to teach Saeris as fast as possible to kill Madra and then focus their energy on this true war. However, Fisher has already faced too much bloodshed for the sake of Yvelia, and this focuses Renfist basically saying, you've given too much, brother, and nodding to him in this way. For Saeris to piece this together at this time is just way too much information. I appreciate that Callie gave us all this information, but on a first read, you have really no idea what's going on, and I definitely didn't. I'm just like, okay, like we're in the library, cool. I had no idea what was really like being said here. And on a reread, you're like, okay. And you're trying to like piece together, what am I supposed to remember from this? Like how much information is here? Which does lead you to want to read the book again, which I did. So I guess there's that. Mission accomplished, Callie. Fisher asks Saeris 2 questions. Have you ever channeled a metal's energy before? So probing her, is this real? Is she really an alchemist? Wants to know. And obviously we know from the very first chapter that she sees the quartz move and that she's seen metal move before, and she has that conversation with Elroy. So yes. So number 2, do you have any experience working with a forge? Again, she answers yes to this one as well, because obviously Elroy works in a forge. So she spent a large time of her life either researching how to mess with metal or spent time messing with metal or glass with Elroy in the forge. She's built for this purpose, and the stars kind of align, which we know is deliberate, and that the fates have made this to be so it would happen, and she would still be this alchemist for Kingfisher. They were made for each other. Chapter 9 begins, titled Righteous Purpose.
First, Renfist and Everlayne are chased behind Kingfisher as he stalks around the castle in search of the forge. Basically, it's these 4 a lot, and they're either following around Kingfisher or following each other. They're just in a group. And Fisher tells Saeris that she is the only living human in Yvelia and she is not safe, which is why all the Fae look at her kind of strangely. The background in that is Fae used to drink from humans. They drained millions before the blood curse was lifted. This was long before Kingfisher's generation, but this is why they still have fangs. So that's why they're there. They're there for a purpose. They don't need blood to maintain their mortality, but the teeth show the shame of their past. And Everlayne's like, oh my God, why are you telling her this? But I mean, this is important information. And she's like, oh, that's so rude, because, you know, that's it is shameful to think of like your past, and that's why you have those fangs, and we used to like, you know, eat people, ultimately drain people of their life force. But he's like, I'm being
And Everlayne's
honest.
like, quit being an asshole. And she deserves to know this. And of course,
Which
could he have said it nicer? Yes. But he says it like this on purpose. And we know that later what his, while stupid, justified reason was for behaving this way.
right. He's just being honest, and she should be used to this by now. He's like, that you know me, you know this, even though I haven't been around for a while, so you must have forgotten me. And he's pretty sour about Everlayne, and how Everlayne's like, well, you were gone for a century too, and that was hard for me to like think about you. He's like, I was the one banished. Hard for you. It was hard for me to be banished for a century. They have like a really,
especially when we find out where he.
Right. Not like I was sitting in a cell. Like he was literally tortured, sorts of levels and planes. So, and then this just like pisses Everlayne off, and she's like, tells him to fuck off and runs away. And then Renfis is like, okay, I'm going to go after her. And Saeris is kind of like stuck. Like, do I go after her or do I stay with Kingfisher? And Renfis tells Kingfisher that, you know, we're your friends and family. We care about you. And Fisher's still being an asshole, saying like, you know, whatever, banishment can change people. And Kingfisher ultimately says like, she's going to come with me because I'm honest, and she's curious of me. She's curious of her powers, and you guys are sugarcoating things, so she's not going to chase after you. And ultimately, he calls it, and Saeris does choose Kingfisher, and this kind of like leads to some sort of tension with Saeris and Everlayne, because oh my god, she didn't choose her, and how could she not choose her and her feelings? But Everlayne this is like kind of her dramatics Disney princess. She's like, oh my gosh, you hurt my feelings. I'm going to run away and throw myself on some sort of object. So
Yeah, but Renfis is like totally in love with Everlayne.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? Do you ship
them? Oh, yeah. They're cute. She's like the
cute.
girly princess, and he's like the gruff warrior that has the heart of gold warrior.
Accent.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not like the Kingfisher's the dark brooding warrior, but he's like the golden retriever type warrior.
Yeah,
you know?
They're like perfect together, cute little match. Yeah.
There.
And do you think they're mated?
So he has tattoos on him, but I don't know tattoos on her, which we know like that's kind of their mating ritual, right? Is the tattoos that mark them.
I don't think that they've solidified anything. I'm wondering, like, I don't think that they've gotten together yet, but clearly he's interested. Renfis. It just doesn't seem like. I'm wondering if we're gonna see them like more together in book 2.
Right. I don't, because we don't know a whole lot about like the mating bonds like we do. I mean, we know a little bit later on.
We know the fates like bring them together.
Right.
But she wakes up in Kalish. So my thoughts are she's going to be right by Renfis whenever she wakes up, and she's going to be in Kalish. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe we're going to see more of that relationship blossom in book 2. So we'll have to see.
I'm for it.
All right. Sorry. Total segue. For it too. Also glad though that they're not the two main characters, because I feel like the story is much more interesting with Saeris and Kingfisher for me. Yes, I would be bored. Agreed. If you have not listened to this audiobook, and I'm honestly not a huge audiobook girly, truly, I'm not. And the voice actor for Kingfisher is chef's kiss. Yeah, so good. But also, so is the voice actor for Saeris. And the reason I mention this is that they play multiple characters so well that they truly do sound like different people. And they're really good at accents. They're just great. They're very good. And they executed this book. The hype is real. It's so good. I really enjoyed it. But his voice when he's talking to her, even at these points, oof, so good.
Oh, yeah.
So Osha
it gets hot in the forge.
Oh, yeah, it does. So he says, she's coming with me, aren't you, Oshalith? She wants to know secrets, and I'm the only one willing to give them to her. And this is where you hear the nickname the first time, Osha, which is a type of butterfly. They hatch, live, and die all in one day. But it also has a separate meaning, which is most sacred. And Saeris goes after Kingfisher, and it's the first time we have her referred to immediately as Osha. Kingfisher's such a dick. Kicks down the door to the forge, and it's literally just like, this place is in shambles. There's nothing. It's decayed, decrepit. It was maybe a working forge 100 years ago. Vines have grown all over everything. There's no working tools. It's rusted. It's just like obviously a room that has magic because they're in the palace, and he breaks down this door, and Saeris is hesitant because she doesn't know shit about magic, and she's the fuck is going on, which I think others have commented that maybe I feel like this is very accurate for someone who just got into a world and has no idea what the fuck's going on, and now you're like in a room that is Harry Potter-esque where you walk in and the outside door looks one way and it's like room of requirement. You walk in and you're like, it's a totally different space in here. What? That is not a normal thing. So she hesitates. There's some more witty banter between the two of them. The Forge is obviously in rough shape, like I said. There's plant life covering everything. Equipment is shattered. There's nothing available that can actually work. And she's like, all right, I guess I'm going to have to start pulling everything together. He says that Clements, the royal archivist, has been receiving stipends for 200 years, and he's been just supposed to be figuring out how the alchemist activated Quicksilver. It looks like he's not been doing what he's supposed to do. Smells of dust and age and animal musk. And so Saeris, she starts cleaning everything up. Fisher then, to her surprise, starts removing his weapons to help clean. And she asks of other courts. She's asking questions while she's there. She's trying to figure out where the heck she is. And Fisher's, ask me something interesting. Won't waste my time. And so she does. And she just goes right literally for the throat and is, what is this on what's this necklace thing? What's going on here? And he finally responds. He doesn't want to respond at first. He blanches when she asks this question. And he talks about how Quicksilver pools, this is where we really get the detail for Saeris, for her perspective, that Quicksilver pools are these pathways that connect different realms. That Quicksilver is volatile and dangerous. It can't be manipulated by anyone. The Quicksilver in Heron's dagger was an ancient blade that was Faye weaponry, which should have been an indicator to us about Heron again, but wasn't on the first read. Was it for you?
No, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I linked it. I mean, yeah, I linked it more towards Madra, which does kind of connect. I was like, oh,
it does connect.
Well, she's like thousands of years old. So yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Clearly something going on with her.
Right. But I kind of glazed over it as much. And clearly Heron, we dismissed, ultimately thinking he's dead. So he's, why waste thought on him? But that's
any more time thought on him. Quicksilver, he explains that it pushes any living being beyond bounds of sanity. Again, in the audiobook, when you start hearing the Quicksilver talking and the way that they're able to put the multiple voices in there is pretty cool.
It's really cool.
So alchemists inherit their abilities. Again, this is pointing to Saeris's bloodline and how little we know about it. Hoping in Brimstone book 2 that we find out a little bit more about this, which I think we will, because we're going to have to build in book 2 to find out more about this Faye and Alchemy series. It's literally called the Faye and Alchemy series. The fact that we wouldn't get more of Saeris's backstory would be mind-blowing to me. We have to get more of it. I'm definitely going to predict, that's my first prediction, we will get Saeris's family backstory in book 2. That's my prediction. I'm just going to lay that flat. In Brimstone, I expect to get her family backstory. Alchemists inherit their abilities. Fisher's mother gave him this relic when he was 11 because, remember, he falls into a pool of Quicksilver at a very young age. And she knows that he would need this. When he comes of age, he joins Bell's armies. And he's traveled to Yvelia, to other realms. He's forced to travel without the relic one time. The Quicksilver takes him. Healer.
Which would Bellicon, that's really fucked up for Bellicon to either make him do that or someone else had the relic. I don't really know we don't know the conditions of that because he was kind of forced into, he was forced into working for Bellicon ultimately. And to force him to go into the Quicksilver knowing that there's a risk there, that's just really fucked up.
I'm not surprised. Bellicon's a dick, right. So, I mean, kind of is putting it nicely. He definitely didn't care about Kingfisher at all and is probably just experimenting with him, if I had to guess. Right. So at this point, Healer ends up drawing out most of it from him, but he was left with still more lasting reminders. He needs to wear this relic all the time to calm the Quicksilver. And we start to find out what that really means because the Quicksilver talks, right? And it's sentient to a certain point. He gave Saeris the relic at this time so she wouldn't die as she traveled through the Quicksilver because being human, it would have killed her. She wouldn't have had the strength to go through the Quicksilver without using his relic. And since he had already been through it before, it wouldn't kill him, but it would be very dangerous for him to do. And likely with a few more times end up being lethal. He saved her because she shouldn't have been able to draw the sword, the silver responded to her, which is something only an alchemist can do. So he is stating here that he's going to use her too. And he's just flat out about it as well.
Okay.
Hey, you can do this thing and we need you to do this thing. He says he's going to use her as a bargaining chip and that it's his only path to freedom. He doesn't care about her life or Bellicant's war, which is great. So he's pretty much a complete asshole to her in this whole section here.
At least he's honest. That's just one thing you can give him. He's honest.
He's honest, but he isn't, because that's not really how he feels. He's displaying something else for her in this moment. He's blunt and to the point, but he's not honest with how he feels. He doesn't really want to treat her this way. He's treating her this way because he's trying to protect her from what he thinks ultimately is the right choice for her, because she's human and she wants to get back to her family and she doesn't understand the situation that she's in. So
They cleared the forge for an hour in silence, and Memphis came to find her. It's towards nightfall, and Memphis is like, wow, it looks like you've done nothing. And Kingfisher is just like shadows. Like, he's just like, shadows go everywhere. And all of a sudden it looks immaculate. And Saeris is like, what in the actual fuck? I asked you earlier if you could just like, magic it away. He said that it's only for righteous purposes. And Renfis like scoffs at that. Like, righteous purposes, really? Fisher and Squith, I just wanted to see if you knew what hard work was. I told you I was magic. And then...
Okay, I told you I was magic. This makes me totally wonder when Saeris becomes Faye. What is her magic as an alchemist? I'm like so excited to see what this looks like in Brimstone. Also, my second prediction. We will for sure see what house or whatever Saeris can do.
We don't know with Malcolm, we know he has magic, but all of his feeders, like they're mindless ultimately. He just has like a mindless horde that goes around and does his work. But are there other more sentient vampires that aren't as, easy to be manipulated?
Well, he has his entire vampire Faye.
Right. We don't know the extent of their magic. So
yeah, but we know that Kingfisher knows him and like they have a history.
Well, of course, we're going to figure out more of what her combination of powers are going to be, because we don't know a whole lot about the vampire's magic, what like powers they do possess. We know Malcolm is powerful. We know he has his court, but we don't know the extent of his magic. Ultimately, we'll learn more.
And her being half Fae, half vampire, not a Fae that was bit and became a vampire, which is a different thing. Yeah, I'll be very curious to see how powerful she is and what she can do. Guess is that she far exceeds Kingfisher's abilities. If I had to guess, that is my thought of what her power would be.
I feel like that's normal, like trope. Yeah, like that would be like a normal trope. So yeah, I would. Yeah, our heroine would far exceed our shadow daddy. Okay,
she might.
So chapter 10 is titled Crumbs, and it's the next morning. Everlayne brings breakfast to Saeris. Since Saeris decided to go with Kingfisher yesterday, Everlayne is like kind of grumpy, being short with her, and Everlayne invited her to the library to read the information they have on Alchemist, and Saeris said she wanted to join and apologize for yesterday. So they have and then Everlane's like, okay, like she just needed an apology, and then they were fine. She's like, okay, everything's fine, it's fine. So as they're in the library, Rissar was scolding Fisher because he was eating like meat, and the smell of it, and he just didn't want it around. You're
in a library, come on,
right?
Have some respect.
This is where we see like Fisher literally doesn't have anywhere. He doesn't have a room. He's literally called the dog. He's not treated like a member of the court. He just, it's like, well, people are gathering here, so I'm gonna eat here. And it's really sad. Rumpus can't stop Fisher's actions anymore than the Corcoran returning. He makes a comment of that, like, the gods left, which I thought was interesting. Like, the gods were very present at one point in time, and then they left. And he said that they went on some sort of pilgrimage thousands of years ago and just never came back. We get a peek into at least one of the universes that the gods are in. We don't know if like there are multiple universes that they're in or where they are, but there's this notion that the gods are actual, which we see the gods are actual like sentient beings, and then they're just away. They have power within this realm. It's really complex what the gods are in this world, and they're very present. Everlayne's like trying to take the plate, and Fisher's literally growling. It doesn't really help the dog sort of comment, because he growls at her like, don't take my food, like a dog too. Yeah.
Right.
And he says he'll go eat with the dogs, and told Saeris that he's going to see her this afternoon, and then he just leaves all grumpy. Renfis volunteers to train with Fisher to let him blow off some steam while they studied. So obviously Bestie goes with him and they kind of, do their guy thing. And he does say before he goes, he does deserve some grace. He has
Renfis.
no rooms here. Yep. Nowhere to eat, nowhere to sleep, no provisions in 110 years. Lane, can you imagine what 110 years would have been like in that place alone? And sorrow drift from each word. So he's not necessarily like excusing his behavior, but it's like we need to have some understanding. Like, being
Right.
tortured for 110 years
Because they
can
haven't
alter
seen
someone.
him. Because they haven't seen him in 110 years either. Everlayne pains at this comment. She says that she spent the first 3 decades imagining it every day, then tried to forget himself to preserve herself. There's an observation by Saeris, of course, because she's fly on the wall in this situation. There's hurt, time, history, secrets between them. Renfis believes there's a way to fix him and that they shouldn't give up on him. But Everlayne does feel hopeless because she doesn't recognize, who this man is because her brother is essentially gone. Everlayne is having a hard time accepting that her brother is a totally different person here. It's important to remember that the way that the Quicksilver worked in this case is Saeris pulls the sword. Madra put the sword in place, which means that the Quicksilver was not functioning. We know that Kingfisher can talk to the Quicksilver as well. However, he couldn't find the pool in the labyrinth until the sword was removed. As the sword is being removed, it's calling to him. The Quicksilver is calling to him again. He finds it. He falls through the pool. As he's falling through the pool, it guides him where to come out at. And he knows to come out at where she is because that's where it called him to. Then the assumption is that he then knows to go to Yvelia as soon as this happens and to get to Everlayne and to get to healers. He immediately goes back to Bellic because he knows that they're going to feel this shift that the Quicksilver has reopened. He's going to be notified and he'll know what's gone on here as well because Bellicon and we don't know this till later, but Bellicon and Alchem are brothers. This isn't revealed to Kingfisher either, but at the time, Kingfisher decides to bring her to the Winter Palace.
Right. I don't think he could have brought her to a Callish. There wasn't a Quicksilver pool that was referenced in Callish. I'm not saying that there isn't, but there wasn't one referenced at all.
And that's the other thing. It's the largest one. That's the reason. The largest one that's available because Bellicon has taken all the pools and merged them into this gigantic pool. The only one that they could come through to get back to Yvelia and eventually to Callish is through the massive pool that Bellicon has. So he didn't have a choice but to take her back there, which is like the last place that he wants to go after being 100 years in the bottom of a labyrinth. The last place he wants to go is to Bellicon, but unfortunately that's basically where he has to go. So I thought that was an interesting thing is to try to piece that together. You may not have picked that up on the first read. I don't know that I was necessarily paying that much attention to that on my first read of all the mechanics of this. So to try to understand how this world works and what's happening here, I think it's important because we're going to need to know that going into Brimstone.
Right. So Everlayne is now kind of like bustling around the table, kind of like, organizing because she's nervous with this conversation. And Sarah stops her, like, is everything okay? And Everlayne says that Kingfisher was literally the best thing in her entire life and he's gone. Like, he's physically there, but the person he knew is gone. And that's heartbreaking for her. So that's why she's struggling because they were very, very close until the Quicksilver basically altered his personality, which makes sense is why she's really frustrated because she knows who he used to be. And then we actually learn...
Yeah, and he's changed because of the 100 years that he also spent in the labyrinth.
Additionally,
yes. He can't talk about that. So there's 100 years, a century of time that he can't talk about as well. So definitely puts a riff in things for sure.
I would say, yes. Then we actually know the different forms of alchemy. So there are 3 branches of alchemy. There are alchemists who are Faye, who sought to discover the path to immortality, which ultimately I believe that's what that's kind of what tied Madra, why she's the immortal queen, ultimately. Faye, who sought to create and invent by transmuting various metals and ores, which we know that's more of like Saeris's branch and what she delves into. And lastly, Faye, who sought to cure illness and disease. So those are like healers, which is the latter 2 are kind of what you reference in the traditional sense of what alchemy is in medieval times, where this other path of discovering immortality, which could be a branch in what they were doing in medieval times, maybe, but that's slightly different. They believe she belonged to the second, the kind that transmutes metals, and alchemists use their gifts to alter the state of compounds and transforms them into precious metals. They transform elements into gold and silver, and when Quicksilver was discovered, it was complete chaos because this is a sentient metal. It's assumed that alchemists opened and closed the pathways. The second of the alchemists went mad and killed themselves. That's the kind of alchemists that kind of Saeris is, the ones that transmute metals, and they ultimately went mad with the Quicksilver, which we, if you listen to the audiobook, having all those little voices in your head would be absolutely like chaotic. It makes sense.
Right.
It literally like taunts you and tells you like to do stupid shit for its own use.
Secrets.
Yes.
Yeah. Saeris questions how she can read the books in common language, and she explains that she's actually speaking common Fae, which I thought was really interesting because she's over here thinking she's speaking some Zovaran language, but actually no, she was speaking common Fae this whole time. And humans first spoke all different languages, but eventually they adopted common Fae because Madra has always spoken common Fae, and she served as an anchor to Fae language. Saeris asks how Madra has ruled for over 1,000 years and how she could have closed all the pathways with a sword if she wasn't an alchemist. This kind of gives a little bit of story here. Madra should have died centuries ago.
Right. And sorry, I just got like, and I don't know if this is like an epiphany or whatever, since we're talking about Madra. I just realized that Madra, Malcolm, and Bellicon, those are like the three brothers from Harry Potter. Like, this is reminding me of the Deathly Hallows. We have the one, the immortality, we have greed, and we have power. Like, we have the three. Yeah. Okay. So sorry. That was just like, wait a minute, this is Harry Potter all over again. So
which one too? Now I need to know.
Well, Madra's obviously the one that escaped death, right? She was the one with the cloak that tries to hide from death, since she is eternal. Then we have the greed, right? Or the one that wanted power, which is Bellicon, and then the one for greed would then be Malcolm.
Okay, so the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone,
and then the cloak.
So I think Malcolm's the Resurrection Stone.
Yes.
The Elder Wand is Bellicon, and the cloak is Madra.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, keep going. Good one.
You keep going. I was like, wait, as you were talking about Madra's immortality. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I got completely segued. We don't think Madra's Faye, right?
How?
I mean, if she's Bellicon's sister,
but like,
and Malcolm's sister, and Malcolm and Bellicon are both Faye. Malcolm's a vampire now, but he was Faye.
A high Faye. And then turned vampire.
So I think Madra hides her ears and stuff. I think she's Faye. There's a conversation between Everlayne and Saeris now about Madra. I'm speculating if Madra here is actually Faye because of what we find out later, but obviously Everlayne doesn't know that Bellicon, Madra, and Malcolm are related. So she's only going off of what she thinks is happening, that Madra should have died century ago as a human. She has some kind of magic, but no clue who performed it or why. The sword closes the door, not the wielder. So it couldn't be human, whoever. And when the pathways were closed, the Fae were trapped where they were. So Saeris asks if those people would have any of those people would still be alive, like any of the alchemists. She's guessing. She's, oh, how old are you, Everlayne? And Everlayne's, oh, I'm 28 years old. And she's like, actually, I was born at the beginning of the 10th age, and she's been alive for 1,486 years. And we can have a challenge, like a side challenge of trying to build this timeline, because she explicitly says the 10th age. Then we find out what year it is for Kingfisher. And then we'd have to piece together what year it must be for Saeris. Which is the 9th age,
which means they don't go by centuries. So an age has to dictate some sort of like shift in season, shift in like empire power. But Bellicon's been in power this whole time. So, or maybe the end of certain wars or battles would be the shift in the age.
Kingfisher was born in the 9th age, and she makes a comment. This is another moment where you see that he manipulates shadows. He's 1,730 years old. Kingfisher corrects her, and it's 1,733. He was eavesdropping from a quiet alcove in the library. He uses his shadows here, obviously, to mask himself in this moment. And he does this repeatedly. And I think this is a nod to him, like, not being able to be away from Saeris for too long and his need to know what's going on with her. And he needs to be close by to figure this out. So Everlayne answers Saeris' question that technically the Fae who found themselves trapped with the Quicksilver could actually still be alive. So again, a nod to Carrion, but I digress. The realm they were visiting was volatile and dangerous place, but it's possible that there are Fae that are still alive before this had occurred. Kingfisher scolds Saeris and says that she should ask him if she has questions because he had already said that, hey, you shouldn't be trusting what other people say. And Saeris argues that he wouldn't tell the truth even if she did ask, which is technically not true. We know that he can't lie, but she doesn't know this at the time. So he emphasizes that if the question is worthy of an answer, that he would be honest. She, of course, asks about his dick size after this because why not? And she says that Elroy said that men always lie about this. So she's testing him to see if he will say the truth. And of course, he responds, "It's big enough to make you scream and then some." It's his response. And she thinks that he's full of shit, that he's lying. And he's just like, I'm a Fae male. You really don't know anything about what you're talking about here. So if you could just go ahead and change the subject. And actually, he's really rude to her. He talks about that she's in heat and all of this. Like, not okay. He's pretty rude. And the first time I read this, I was like, damn, what a dick. He's not a nice guy at all. She kind of had it coming for asking such a rude question in the first place. But also, yeah, she's not friendly herself. So for everyone he's such a dick, I'm like, was Saeris really that nice?
No,
Doesn't seem like she really was.
No. And then she's like, okay, let's change the subject and ask if he raised the entire city to the ground because that was one of the accusations that Bellicon threw at him. And he's like, yeah, I did. But he wouldn't really go into details. And then she asks where he was banished to, and he says hell. And then he asks for her hand, and he pressed something cool into her palm, and it's cold and burning. And he then commands her to make it stop herself. So this is Quicksilver that he places into her hand, and he's like trying to get her to get into her powers. He tells her to listen to it. There's you and there's pain, nothing else. He whispers, move past it, move through it, and let it roll over you. Then she started hearing a bunch of voices in her head screaming, Anarath more, Anarath more. And she looked down her hand, the Quicksilver then becomes in a liquid state. She wakes it up. As long as Kingfisher's touching her, though, she's safe. Since he's wearing the pendant and Kingfisher's touching her, then, the Quicksilver isn't going to, invade her mind space. He guides her on how to make the Quicksilver distill, and she ordered the Quicksilver to go to sleep. And it doesn't willingly go to sleep. It's like, no. But she ultimately commands it to go to sleep, and he expected this test to go differently, and Saeris punches him in the face for it. Because ultimately, before he places the Quicksilver into her palm, the way if you listen to it, it's kind of sexual in how he's hovering over her and touching her hand and whispering into her and leaning into her. It's getting her kind of riled up a little bit, a little hot. And then he has the test of the Quicksilver, and she's like, what the actual fuck? And punches him. And that's how that chapter ends.
Yes, she does. Yeah. And so Anarath Moor, of course, is release us. That's the translation of what this means. And it's repeated and chanted over and over again. There's a couple different reasons why that phrase is uttered, and we'll get into that more. Let's go into our mystery Q&A. These questions have not been shared to either one of us. One of us knows what our question is prior to asking.
My question is, and it's kind of a two-parter. So what was your favorite millennial trend, and what was your least favorite millennial trend?
There was a lot of millennial trends. Oh my God. So I guess my favorite millennial trend that I can think of, I liked all the emo stuff, the emo kids and that whole section of music, even ska music. That time in music was great, and there was so much culture to that. I didn't take part in too crazy of the hair, but I definitely had the big side swept bangs, and I had one time had a Monroe piercing, all the things.
Did you tease the back to make it bigger?
No.
Okay.
No. I didn't do all that. It wasn't that crazy. It wasn't that dramatic. I always loved the kids that did and went full into the whole scene. Yeah, I would probably say that was one of the most really iconic parts of millennial nostalgia. And probably my least favorite were some of the shoes. We had those plastic sandals that looked like sponges for a while that everybody had. Then we also had those like brown sandals that were like platformish, but like leather. Do you remember these? And they were like really
Yes.
uncomfortable, but everybody had them.
Yep.
And like the fake Uggs that everybody had, and the real Uggs for that matter. But
Yeah.
like wearing them in Florida, what are we doing? What are we doing? So I would say shoes
Uggs
as
with
a whole.
shorts
Millennial
was like
shoes.
a vibe.
No, but I did love the tights with the jean skirts. I thought that was cute.
Okay.
I had black tights with the jean skirts. Did you ever wear this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No,
That
I
was a
definitely
vibe.
did.
Just saying.
What I hated, so because we layered a lot. Millennials layered a ton.
Oh yeah, we were big
we had our
layers.
like comfort tank top,
And all of our clothes
our
were too
emotional
small.
support
Why were our
tank
clothes
top.
too small?
Because we had layers.
Yeah.
We had the ultra long tank top, and we had a really short
God,
like
what was a deal?
polo, like Hollister Aeropostale polo that we layered two over because we had to have layers. I don't know. Yes, we definitely layered all of our clothes. The one like outfit layering that definitely was not good was the dress over jeans. Do you remember that?
Oh, why
Like
would
the
we
long,
do that?
the dresses
no, I
and the
remember.
baggy jeans and I'm like
Yeah.
that didn't even then I was like
The
that
jeans that dragged in the water,
it's not a look.
like puddles. No, it's not a look.
Yeah.
And then when all those jeans started to come back, like recently within the last 2 years, and I'm like, y'all about to
Yeah, the
regret
wide-
this, but okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of wide like jeans. It's a style. You buy jeans like 5 sizes too big and you just to get a belt. I'm like, why wouldn't you wear pants that fit you? So, but then
Use
again,
logic, we didn't,
right.
etc.
Yeah, that just wasn't the greatest. But
No.
definitely so my favorite trend was like Lisa Frank. I Lisa Frank everything. I love Lisa Frank, like with all the animals and it's all like rainbow.
There's a Netflix documentary about Lisa Frank now, and apparently things were not good at that company. I don't know the whole. I didn't watch the Netflix documentary.
I think I'm gonna stay away from that one.
I watched the one about Bob Ross, and I was like, I'm never doing this to myself again. Did you see that one?
No.
The one about Bob Ross?
So many idols like being really sketchy people. I'm just like, ugh.
No doubt. That's not what happened. Bob Ross
No.
is totally fine. What happened to him
Okay.
is he was really sick and he got taken advantage of on his deathbed and signed over his entire business to somebody else, and his son didn't get anything. It's really sad. Like
That's
the whole
so
family gets
sad.
nothing. So don't. Well, I just wanted
Yeah.
to tell you so that you didn't think Bob Ross was like a bad dude. He was not.
No, I just stay away from all that because it kind of ruins my childhood. I try, ignorance is bliss. But yeah, Lisa Frank was definitely, that was my vibe.
Okay.
Your question.
Yeah. What is a value that is important to you?
Oh, hit me with a real question. Like gauging other people or just something that I value in myself?
No,
for
it's something
myself?
you hold to yourself. Like you hold yourself to.
Oh, okay. I mean, something that I value just sounds so cliche. Honesty and hard work. Are you
sure you're not Gryffindor?
Right. Well, because I've always just been pushed and strive to like do my best at things, and a lot of the times it comes from my childhood. My dad pushed me and my brother a lot and making sure that we did what we needed to do to be successful and whatnot, yada yada. And it kind of just ingrained a work ethic, which not a lot of people have, but I just can't not like complete projects. And I just have such a value in my own product and my own abilities that I have to produce anything or most things to the best of my ability, or my brain like malfunctions. I'm in grad school right now, and if I get like anything below like a 98, I'm like, what did I do wrong? Tell me so I can fix it. Yeah, I have a goal because I graduated undergrad as cum laude, and I wanted to graduate grad school as a magna cum laude. So that was my goal.
Oh wow.
So I just have a work
pressure.
ethic. Like no, none whatsoever. But yeah, so I guess that would be my biggest value that I have of myself.
Okay.
I don't know if that fully answers your question or if I just went on a tangent.
No, it does. Mine is I'm really big on loyalty, which is very Gryffindor of me to say, but totally true. I'm really big on loyalty, but I'm also really big on protecting those you love and care about and making sure they know that you're there for them. That means that you show up for them. If you say you're going to be there for a loved one, that you're there and you show up.
Right.
Showing up and or communicating a reason why you cannot show up. Communication for me is a very big deal. So I think one of my value systems is don't say you're going to do something if you're not going to do it.
Right.
that to me matters a great deal. So
Right.
I think that's probably one of my big value systems that's important to me. All right.
That's fair. All
Cool.
right. So before we wrap up, let's talk about what's coming up next in Book Club After Dark.
Next week, we're going to dive into chapters 11 through 15 of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. So hit that subscribe button to hear more of our exciting book talk. We're looking forward to dissecting this novel with you.
And don't forget, we want to hear from you. If you have thoughts on Quicksilver or suggestions for future reads, drop a comment below or message us on one of our social media platforms at Book Club After Dark Pod. Show us your fan art, theories, or anything bookish you'd like to share.
Yeah, you can visit us on our website, bookclubafterdark.co, stay up to date on our cozy content, and check out our merch.
So that's all for tonight. Sleep tight, night owls. Until next time, happy reading.